Breaking news from around your world on this Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Catholic religious orders from around the world apologized Tuesday for having failed to respond when their priests raped children, acknowledging that their family-like communities blinded them to sexual abuse and led to misplaced loyalties, denial, and cover-ups. The two umbrella organizations representing the world's religious orders issued a joint statement ahead of Pope Francis's Sex Abuse Prevention Summit, which opens Thursday. They vowed to implement accountability measures going forward to ensure that cover-ups by religious superiors end and that children are always safe in the presence of clergy. With a few exceptions, religious orders have largely flown under the radar in the decades-long scandal, since the focus has been on how diocesan bishops protected their priests and moved them from parish to parish, where they were free to abuse again. In the statement, the groups said they were ashamed at how they had failed the most vulnerable they were meant to serve, and blamed the strong sense of family that their communities fostered for having blinded them to the warning signs. A former North Korean diplomat says leader Kim Jong has no intention of giving up his nuclear weapons and sees his upcoming second summit with President Donald Trump as a chance to cement his country's status as a nuclear weapons state. Tae Yong-ho, who defected to South Korea in 2016, said in a news conference in Seoul on Tuesday that next week's meeting in Vietnam will be a failure if Trump can't get Kim to declare he will abandon all of his nuclear facilities and weapons and return North Korea to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement. Tae worked as a minister at the North Korean embassy in London before fleeing to South Korea. He is the highest-level North Korean diplomat to defect to the South. More than 8,000 people have been infected with measles this year in the Philippines. Less than a week after the Southeast Asian country declared a measles outbreak in the capital of Manila and other parts of the nation, the Department of Health has counted 8,443 measles cases between January 1st and February 16th. The number of cases is a 253% increase from the same period last year. A total of 136 people have died from the disease in that same time period, 40% of whom were under the age of 4. The Department of Health said the number of dead is a 491% increase from the 23 people who died during the same period last year. To combat the rising number of measles cases, the Philippines Department of Health enlisted one of its most famous citizens, Senator Manny Pacquiao, to convince people to vaccinate their children. In a new infomercial titled Knockout Measles, released Monday, the award-winning boxer encourages the public to be vigilant against the disease. Rescuers are searching for a number of people following an avalanche at a popular ski resort in the Swiss Alps. Officials have confirmed that the avalanche was reported at Crans, Montana at about 3:15 p.m. local time Tuesday. Images on social media suggest a marked slope was affected, but police have not yet confirmed the exact location of rescue operations. Reports in local media suggest as many as a dozen people may have been buried. Search dogs and at least 2 rescue helicopters are reportedly at the site. According to Reuters, weather in the area had warmed in recent days and caused some snow to melt. However, the avalanche risk in the region was set at only 2 out of 5 on Tuesday. Ski resorts in Switzerland are expected to be busier than usual this week because of half-term school breaks. The president of the resort's ski lift company told Reuters that members of the Army were among dozens of rescuers at the scene. The Swiss resort is set to host 2 Women's World Cup races this weekend. The European Union on Tuesday reached a tentative agreement on the first specific EU standards for trucks, seeking to get polluting CO2 levels down. The agreement among negotiators from the European Parliament and member nations say such emissions for new trucks will have to be 30% lower by 2030 compared with today's levels. Heavy trucks carry more than 2/3 of freight across the 28-nation bloc. A spokesperson for the EU said the standards will help tackle emissions as well as bring fuel savings to transport operators and cleaner air for all Europeans. The rules will still need to be formally endorsed, but are not expected to pose any political problems after Tuesday's deal. Under the tentative deal, emissions from new trucks will have to be 15% lower by 2025, moving to 30% 5 years later. Fines would apply to producers who fail to comply. The EU also has such standards for cars and light vans. The move is also part of the EU's plan to cut emission of greenhouse gases to net zero by 2050 in an attempt to avoid global warming. The EU is the first major economy to set its sights on achieving climate neutrality in the next 3 decades. A prominent Chinese businesswoman dubbed the Ivory Queen was sentenced to 15 years in prison by a Tanzanian court Tuesday for smuggling the tusks of more than 350 elephants, weighing nearly 2 tons, to Asia. Yang Fenglan was charged in October 2015, along with 2 Tanzanian men, with smuggling 860 pieces of ivory between 2000 and 2004, worth $5.6 million. All 3 denied the charges. Police sources said Yang, who is 69, had lived in Tanzania since the 1970s and was Secretary General of the Tanzania-China-Africa Business Council. The judge sentenced Yang and her co-defendants to 15 years each after they were convicted of leading an organized criminal gang. The judge also ordered them to either pay twice the market value of the elephant tusks or face another 2 years in prison. In court documents, prosecutors said Yang intentionally did organize, manage, and finance a criminal racket by collecting, transporting, or exporting and selling government trophies. Payless Shoe Source has officially declared bankruptcy and said it will close all 2,500 of its North American stores by the end of May. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection late Monday. The move, files reports last week, that signaled the retailer was heading in that direction. Liquidation sales started last weekend with plans to shutter some stores by the end of March. This marks the second time Payless has filed for bankruptcy in the last 2 years, but this time the company will not survive. The Kansas-based company held out hope a buyer would bail out the company, but that didn't happen. The company has debts and assets between $500 million to $1 billion. Several Chinese shoe companies are among its unsecured creditors. Like many old brick-and-mortar retailers, Payless has struggled to compete with the convenience of online shopping or the scale of Walmart. Payless locations outside North America will remain open, including 420 company-owned stores and 370 international franchises. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is back on the Supreme Court bench 8 weeks after surgery for lung cancer. The 85-year-old justice walked unassisted to her seat beside Chief Justice John Roberts when the court began its public session Tuesday. Ginsburg wore her customary black robe and ornamental collar. She had returned to the Supreme Court building on Friday for the first time since her surgery in December, but that was for the justice's private conference. She was also seen on camera Monday by the TMZ website walking through a Washington airport. Ginsburg missed the court's arguments in January as she recovered from the surgery, but the court said she participated in the court's work during her absence. President Trump is moving closer toward his goal of creating a space force, but it won't begin as a separate military branch as he envisioned. The Space Force instead initially will be created as part of the Air Force, but could be spun into a separate military department in the future. That's according to senior administration officials who briefed journalists on a directive Trump is scheduled to sign Tuesday to establish the Space Force. Trump says the force is needed to ensure U.S. dominance in space. Some lawmakers have expressed concerns about the need and potential cost. Details about the cost will be part of the 2020 budget proposal Trump will release next month. Karl Lagerfeld, Chanel's iconic designer who dominated high fashion for the past 50 years, died Tuesday in Paris. Although he spent virtually his entire career at luxury labels catering to the very wealthy, including 20 years at Chloe, Lagerfeld's designs quickly trickled down to low-end retailers, giving him global influence. He was known to be very kind to his staff at Chanel and was famous for giving journalists long interviews after each fashion show. The 85-year-old also shared his unmarried life in his Parisian mansion with a Siamese cat called Chopette. Tributes from fellow designers, Hollywood celebrities, models, and politicians quickly poured in. Donatella Versace thanked Lagerfeld for the way he inspired her and her late brother Gianni Versace. Former supermodel Claudia Schiffer, who credits Lagerfeld as her mentor, called him her magic dust. Schiffer said, "What Andy Warhol was to art, he was to fashion. He is irreplaceable." And that's your update for this Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. I'm Larry Rice. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.